You're listening to the Jacki Daily Show. You know what? About 90% of the time, when you listen to me talk to my guests, you're hearing Jacki Daily talking to a man. But some days I get lucky. Some days I get another lady in the studio. It's not every day, but I'm really happy when I can welcome another lady into the studio, and today's that day or one of those days. So with us today is Margaret Graham, and she is from San Antonio, flew in to Dallas, Texas. She's with MPG Petroleum, Inc. And if you caught that MPG sounds a whole lot like her initials, you thought right, because it's her company. She is, I'm very proud to say, the first lady wildcatter I have ever met in my entire life, Margaret, ever. So you have no idea how excited I am to find another entrepreneurial female spirit out there in the oil patch. And here I am, I'm just the gal in the studio. I just preach the good news. I don't get to do the fun stuff.
Well, I'm just thrilled to be here, Jacki, and to have the opportunity to meet you and have this interview. And you were a beacon of wisdom and information that the public needs to have. And so it's pretty rare for me to be in this position as well. I'm normally working at a drafting table or in front of a computer screen or in a boardroom presenting a drilling project. So it's not very often that I'm really in a position where I am talking to a wide audience of listeners that are interested in knowing things about the fossil fuel industry.
Right. Well, believe me, I feel like I'm the least of the people on my show. My guests are the experts. You guys actually make it happen out there, create the jobs, make the world turn, fuel the economy. And so I'm just so honored to have you here. And I think probably before we go any further, for people who are not in energy, can you tell them even what a wildcatter is? What do I mean when I say wildcatter?
I am a geologist, actually, by background, and the term wildcatter is really a oil field colloquialism that refers to geologists that tend to drill higher risk projects that are looking for actual new reserves as opposed to working within areas that have already established production. So it's the difference between what I would say are map makers and oil finders.
Right. So to read between the lines there, the reason why the wildcat is the animal attributed to this particular disposition is because this is not for the faint of heart. This is not for the shrinking violet or the fearful. These are for people who are bold, who think big, who push the limits, who do things other people have not done. Would that be an accurate description?
I think those are all terms that would apply to an independent in the oil and gas business, and particularly one that stretches themselves out to bring about new concepts, looking for reserves that are of real significance. I'm talking world-class size reserves as opposed to just making a well. The oil and gas industry is inherently a high-risk area of the fossil fuels business. We're drilling wells sometimes miles into the ground, using indirect information to try to model what the geology looks like in a hole that we can't see any further down than you, other than through the use of indirect data such as seismic data and other various geological forms of data. So, and it is inherently a high-risk business, and it is a business in the geology exploration side of things that is truly as much art as it is science. So yes, the creativity, the willingness to put forth your ideas, and your ability to get other people to agree with you that those are ideas that are worthwhile pursuing and actually putting their money at risk to pursue.
We're talking with Margaret Graham. She's the president of MPG Petroleum down in San Antonio. So, Margaret, what made you decide to go into geology and oil and gas?
It was a happy accident. I was studying a program of environmental studies at Trinity University. This was a new department, and most of my science projects from high school were always environmentally related. I was always an animal lover and a person who loved the nature and being amongst it. So I naturally thought that my area of focus and education in my career would be related to the environmental business, and I was busy pursuing a major in environmental studies and wandered into the geology department simply to satisfy the science requirement that was needed to get my degree in environmental studies. So I had no ambition towards being a geologist. In fact, didn't know a geologist in my life, didn't really know what geology was about. But as I was reading the course catalog, it looked to me that geology would be a fun way to get my science credits out of the way. Field trips were discussed as requirements, and I thought, well, this sounds like a lot of fun. We're going to go camping and do some science, maybe. Much to my surprise and chagrin, as a freshman, first semester freshman taking the introductory course to geology at Trinity University that was being taught by the department head, Dr. Donald McGannon, I learned very quickly that geology was no walk in the park. I was carrying 17 hours that semester. I worked harder for my introductory geology course than I did with all my other classes combined. So for my efforts, which were diligent, I received a B at the end of the day, and I was proud of that.
Right. We're talking with Margaret Graham, and she is the president of MPG Petroleum, Inc., out of San Antonio, Texas. You know something? I went down to the Perot Museum here in Dallas, and if you haven't had a chance to go, it's like a natural history museum. It's supposed to have the largest collection of dinosaurs anywhere on Earth. It has, for anyone who likes geology or anything close to geology, any type of rock you can imagine is showcased. They do Journey into the Barnett Shale Formation, showing you a frack job. By the way, the Perot Museum is not a sponsor of this show. This is not a paid advertisement. I went. I loved it. So if you're listening to this and your kids say, well, that's kind of cool, I kind of like that. You know what? Maybe you can fuel the passions of a budding geologist by taking them. If they're inspired by what Margaret's saying, take them to the Perot Museum. I think it's super cool.
You know, you are exactly right. I find that children have a very natural interest in all things geology, really. If you show them specimens of minerals and rocks and fossils, they are just naturally gravitating towards that. And you know, thinking about along those same lines of conversation, I would say that beyond wandering into the geology department, just, you know, for my need to satisfy science credit, the real, you know, informing point in my life was probably when I was 10 years old, and my aunt gave me a chemistry set for Christmas. I have no idea why she did that, but she did, and I immediately pushed the Barbie dolls and the bicycles and the whole other toys that a little girl is normally given, and totally focused on that chemistry set, and I was enthralled with it. So every time I was going to be given a gift, I would be dragging my mother to the chemistry department at the toy store so that I could either buy a Bunsen burner or some test tubes or some specimens to dissect. So honestly, that's really what it is. You expose a child at a young age, at a formative age, to something that they may not otherwise get exposure to in the everyday world. And you might turn the knob, flip the switch, and create a scientist. And I think that's really what informed me.
You know, for me, it was my grandparents taking me to all of the presidents' homes and battlefield sites. And I became so interested in politics from age 5. I had all the presidents memorized, all their mottos memorized. The passions start really early in life. The interests manifest themselves early in life. And so it's interesting that you had the same experience very young. Let's face it, you are, and I almost hesitate to go down this road, but it's an interesting and I think necessary road. You are a woman in a man's world out there in the Wildcatter kind of sphere. And I know that because I've been to so many oil and gas conferences. I've met literally hundreds of people, many geologists. A lot of people are shocked to know you go to an oil and gas conference, it's mostly scientists in the room or landmen. I mean, you got a real brain trust there. And so, yeah, I look around the room, and usually there are about 5 to 10% ladies. If you dice out the percentages of ladies at oil and gas conferences, probably the majority of them are what we call booth babes. Okay? You go over to the conference, the expo, and you got lovely ladies who are there almost like Vanna White, right, in each booth or every other booth. And they are hired to be there to make the booth interesting. And these are pretty women. They are not oil and gas professionals like Margaret. They didn't go to geology class, and they probably didn't do a lot of equations to earn their position at the conference. But so how has it been for you being a lady out there in the field?
Well, I would say it's been my honor, and it's been quite an adventure, which is, I think, a long ways yet to go. I have fun every day doing what I do. And
Me too. Me too.
And I would just like to say that it was really men that opened the door for me, because my professors in the geology department at Trinity University at that time were all male. Now we have a lady who is the head of the geology department, Dr. Diane Smith. Mm-hmm, she and I are very good friends. But then that was fairly well unheard of. And so I would say I was informed mostly by good men in the science of geology. And then when I graduated, I was given a job, really, by men that thought that I deserved an opportunity to go to work in their company. So I have no other perspective or basis other than my own. And I'm often asked the same question: what is it like to be a lady in the oil and gas business? And the truth is I really don't know what it's not like.
Right. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Well, I share that because I've always been in a man's world myself, whatever I was doing. And what happens is, even according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, about, I think it was last year or the year before, in oil and gas, in the white-collar section of the sector, so lawyers, PR people for the companies, administrators, executives, maybe, they're actually 51% lady hires, not men. Now, I think that's a recent phenomenon.
Yes.
And I would also say that I'm old enough now, I'm still in my 30s, but I'm old enough now to know that there's a certain percentage of ladies when you first come out of school and enter the workforce, and then that quickly winnows down over time. It narrows down over time, partly because people decide to do other things, or maybe they decide to have a family and take time off from working. But now that I'm past the mid-30s, I'm finding there are fewer and fewer of me in my area too. And I assume that's true across the board. But we have to remember that, as you say, the opportunities come to me or to you, often from men, because they're the people who are there.
Right.
And so, sometimes maybe the ladies aren't as well represented because they just don't show up. I mean, I don't feel that I've been blocked from much opportunity in my life by virtue of being a woman. Now, I might have had more to prove sometimes. When you go into a meeting and you have to ask for money, big money, do you find that you do better if you have a male partner with you?
Probably I would, except that I don't normally carry a token male with me. It has occurred to me that I might be wise to do so. I hear the comment that I don't look like what they expected me to look like. And so I'm always curious about that and said, well, because normally the qualification and the discussions that lead up to a meeting occur over the telephone. So my normal response is, what did you expect me to look like?
Right, exactly. Exactly. We're talking with Margaret Graham, and she is the president of MPG Petroleum, Inc., out of San Antonio, Texas. So, no, yeah, that's the exact same thing that I hear sometimes, because now, like on my professional email, there's a photo of me. And if they've met me on the phone, they say, well, you don't look what we expected you to look like. I always wonder the same thing. I also wonder, do they say that to men very often?
No.
The answer is no. And what are the implications of that? I don't know.
This is what I think. I think the initial response is a little bit of surprise, maybe sometimes shock. But I also do think that as soon as I begin the presentation and get into the topic that I'm there to discuss, I think then the gender gap goes away.
I agree. Yeah. Well, and the other thing is, we're being descriptive here. We're not whining or complaining. We're describing to you a reality, right? Because if you were the type to feel I've been treated unfairly, I don't get a fair shake, things are stacked against me, you'd never be in your field in the first place.
That's absolutely right.
That's it.
There's no room for crying in baseball or in oil and gas.
No way. And I think that you have to be the kind of woman who doesn't need someone to hold your hand, pat you on the back, say, I support you and I'm proud of you. You just have to do it because it's what you want to do. It's what you can do well. And, or at least that's how I feel in my job. I assume it's how you feel in yours. Because you can't wait for someone to congratulate you.
I wake up thinking in the morning about what I need to do for the day and what my long-term goals are, particularly with my current project. And I go to sleep thinking about that.
Right.
If you're waiting for somebody to tell you that you've done a good job and you're a good girl, that doesn't happen too often. But when it does happen, it's a pretty nice surprise. And it does feel good for sure. Everybody likes, a compliment or a pat on the back now and then. But that's not what motivates me. No. What motivates me, and it's really not even money that motivates me. What motivates me is mostly to distinguish myself in my field of study, particularly as a woman in the oil and gas business. At the end of the day, I want to join the Billion Barrel Oil Finders Club.
Right, of course. Who wouldn't? I'd like to join the Billion Barrel Oil Finders Club, too.
Come along with me and get on the team, Jacki.
Heck yeah. And if I were a landowner, I would beg you to frack on my land. You know what I mean? Like,
that's right.
I keep telling everyone's complaining about fracking. I'm like, are you kidding me? There's no one I'd rather see at the front door than the landman who's come to give me the good news that someone would like to frack under my house. But that hasn't happened yet.
Well, there is so much misinformation out there in the public. It's mostly the oil and gas industry's fault because we haven't until recently done a good job of putting information out there to educate the public so that they view oil and gas in the proper perspective, which is an absolute necessity of everyday life. We would be back in the caveman days if it were not for fossil fuels.
That's right.
Fossil fuels drive the economy of the world. And most people don't quite appreciate that. They're not sure when they turn the light switch on where that electricity came from. But at the end of the day, most of it comes from a well somewhere, a gas well typically. Of course, there's a lot of coal generated utility plants. And of course, coal is a fossil fuel as well. We're all talking about the carbon atom, and, it is ubiquitous. It is part of everyday life. It's part of our bodies. It's part of almost everything we see and touch and come into contact with every day. So the thought that oil and gas is some toxic, nasty substance that we would rather stay away from is really pretty ridiculous.
It is the cocktail of Mother Earth.
It is that. And speaking of cocktails, I find that people think nothing of spending $8 or even $12 if you're in Manhattan on a martini, which is maybe a couple of ounces of fluid, most of which absolutely is also hydrocarbon.
Right.
It's called methanol.
Right.
However, they cry like a banshee if they're spending $3 on a gallon of gasoline. Now, I think a martini might get you a good, warm, fuzzy feeling and a trip to the facilities,
right?
After several of them. However, a gallon of gasoline might get you across the neighborhood. It might get you to the hospital that you need to go to. It might get you to the school that you're dropping your children off to, or to your job, your place of employment. So I find it silly. You buy a bottle of nail polish and you might spend $5 or $6 for maybe a half ounce of nail polish. By the way, what is the base of nail polish? Hydrocarbons.
Yes.
And a woman thinks nothing of that. And so we're talking about a gallon, which is 64 ounces, a very important fluid, which I like to think of as liquid gold. Without that, we are really back in the caveman days. We have no air conditioning. We have no heating. We have no transportation.
No health care.
No health care.
No food.
That's exactly right. The world is run on fossil fuels. And I, being I think a sensible person and also a person who was informed early on from an environmental aspect, I am all for using green renewables in the area that it makes sense to. Mm-hmm. If I were the king or the queen of the world, I would say everybody should have solar panels on their roof. Everybody should have a windmill if they're in the area that there is sufficient wind to keep it turning. Everybody should have their own water well. I'd say let's use every source of energy that is economically feasible to use for the particular purpose that it is good for. But at least in my lifetime, in your lifetime, and if we had children, I don't, and I don't know whether you do or not, Jacki, but if you did, and even in their grandchildren's lifetime, you will not find that there is a suitable replacement for fossil fuels, and I'm mostly referring to oil and gas. Everything has its applications, and I'm for using all of it where it makes sense. But let's not let the public go uneducated and misinformed by the liberal media to the extent that oil and gas and the oil and gas industry in general is some sort of pariah, because we're absolutely the only thing that keeps us between the lives that we enjoy and live today and going back into the cave.
We're talking with Margaret Graham, and she's the president of MPG Petroleum in San Antonio, Texas. And we're talking about the importance of fossil fuels. And the media you're talking about, who can be so critical, would not exist without fossil fuels. One of the shocking things I find all the time is that people don't understand what fossil fuels are used for in their everyday lives. As you mentioned a minute ago, most women don't realize that most cosmetics, beauty products, clothing are made from fossil fuels.
Absolutely.
I'm wearing right now something that is a blend of spandex and nylon and I don't know what all. I promise you, all of that, if you dial it back, and Margaret can tell you this because she's a scientist, you're going back to fossil fuels. When she says hydrocarbons, for people who are not energy people, she means oil and gas. She's talking about what the media has told you is this evil oil and gas, and it's so toxic to the environment, except, oh, wait, Mother Nature created it, for starters. So, Margaret, what do you think is the one way, or not one way, but some ways that the oil and gas community can better communicate its worth to the public?
I think it's mostly media-driven, liberal media-driven, that put the fossil fuels business, petrochemical industry in the position of pariah, and it's a very misinformed directive. The job, I think, of the oil and gas industry, and we're beginning to do it. I've seen a few commercial spots where there is actually a lady in a nice black suit, and there are some schematics showing a well being drilled and the various casing and cement sheaths that are surrounding that well and protecting it, and protecting reservoirs that might contain potable water sources. To explain that all these safeguards and measures are actually in place, and to explain that drilling of wells is not a haphazard or dangerous thing that we do. And so I think we are beginning to do that. I think we need to do a lot more of it. I think that we need to be in the school systems more often, and we need to focus on educating the youth about this. I will tell you that most geologists, most people that are in the oil and gas business are inherently naturalist, or they would not have been interested in geology in the first place.
Right. Well, they all belong to conservationist clubs, sportsmen's clubs, hunting clubs.
That's correct.
It's almost ubiquitous. If you go to oil and gas conferences, nearly everyone is involved in conservation.
Well, that's exactly right. From a practical standpoint, if you're in the business of producing, exploring for, finding, developing, and producing oil and gas, the last thing you want is that your hard-earned work and investment is going to waste. So the last thing you'd want is for it to get away from you. It is very, very rare that you have a spill. It is very rare that you have a blowout. Or
fugitive gas or something like that, right? Because what Margaret's saying is it costs millions of dollars to develop just a single well sometimes. The last thing you want is for it to seep out and you lose the hydrocarbon, you lose the resource.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah.
And the last thing you would want to do is cause any contamination of potable water sources. When I say potable water sources, of course, I mean drinking water sources, or any accidental spillage or escape at the surface that would create a problem with cleanup, because that's just time that you're shut down and time and expense to remediate and to clean up a spill. And as I said, these incidents, is as many years as I've been in the oil and gas business, I've seen a lot of wellheads. I've seen a lot of stained wellheads where a little bit of oil has maybe squirted out the stuffing box, and there's oil staining maybe in a foot or two diameter around a wellhead. I have never seen as much as a dead lizard. So that should inform, I think, the public that hydrocarbons, oil and gas, are carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen in one or more different combinations. And these various hydrocarbon strings are the components of the various phases of crude oil and the various gases, from butanes to propanes to isopropanes, and so on and so forth. These are naturally occurring compounds which quickly dissipate in the environment. All of the hullabaloo about the Macondo is as awful as that was, and as much as I would be the first one on board to say that shouldn't have happened, that was a series of people being asleep at the switch. That should never have happened. I'm not saying that was okay, but what I am saying is this: with all of the hullabaloo about it, all of the media, all of the money being spent on lawsuits, and the money that is being paid by BP and the drilling contractor that was involved in that incident, all of the lawsuits, I don't think there has been any known incidents of fish kill, of any tracing of illnesses that have come up the food chain through fish that people ate. I think the lawyers and the media had a heyday, and there was the people involved. Certainly, this should not have happened. It was not something that was inevitable. It was something that should have been controlled. It should never have happened in the first place. Once it got away from them, it was very hard to control, simply because of the volume of the pocket they hit. Now, as much as they were beat up for the blowout, which is what it was, the other side of it is, whoever thanks them for the millions, hundreds of millions, and billions of barrels of oil that these people explore for and find and put into the market, into the economy, that support the economy, that support the lifestyle that we enjoy. I never hear anyone thanking them for the work that they do, only beating the hell out of them when something goes wrong. And I can tell you that's a very rare incident. How many of Macondos do you remember other than it?
When she says Macondo, she means the BP oil disaster that happened in 2010. We're talking with Margaret Graham, and she is the president of MPG Petroleum, Inc., out of San Antonio, Texas. And listen, you were talking about the media and how they blew it up and sensationalized. They certainly did. It was also the fault of politicians on Capitol Hill, because I was working there at the time. I remember a certain Texas congresswoman. Well, I'll just give you her name. Her name is Sheila Jackson Lee, making outrageous claims about what was happening down in the Gulf, because she represents a Gulf area. And in some hearings we had in my committee, which was Judiciary Committee, I'd have to go back and look at the number of years, but she claimed something like that all of the fish in the Gulf would be dead for decades after this. Now, how irresponsible, and my boss at the time, chairman of the subcommittee on the Constitution, Trent Franks, he was an oil and gas guy, third generation. So he was able to bring some science, facts, logic to what was happening. And he said the same thing you said. He's like, look, this is going to dissipate as a matter of natural occurrence. This is just what happens when hydrocarbons enter the environment.
That's correct. There are oil-eating microbes that proliferate in ocean waters. And the wave activity, the movement of the waters combined with the microbes pretty well make it a non-topic. I don't think, other than a few incidences of some oil accumulating possibly along some shorelines, which was easily contained and cleaned up, I don't think that there has been any scientifically documented evidence that there was any real harm done to the environment. Certainly not compared to the harm done to the economy by the stoppage of work.
Right.
And I, in all due respect to Sheila, what she knows about the oil and gas industry and about hydrocarbons would fill a sewing thimble.
Yes, and she represents Houston, Texas, making it all the more unforgivable.
It's outrageous.
Yeah, there's no excuse for the sensationalism.
Oil built Houston.
Yes.
And if you are a representative, the political representative of that particular area and the people that live in that area, the least you should do is take an introductory course to have some basic knowledge about oil and gas and be well informed. But politicians, you've been in the political world, and I think that you might agree with me that most politicians are parroting the words and the ideas that they think will get them votes to perpetuate their presence in that office. And whether they're doing it for perhaps business opportunities that might come their way as a result, or for self-aggrandizement, some need for attention, I think you're going to find, or at least it's my impression, that most of them are in it for those kinds of things, as opposed to the real reason that they should be there, which would be to make important changes that would be helpful to the country and to the people that they serve.
See, doing that would be the hard work.
That's right.
We're talking with Margaret Graham. She's the president of MPG Petroleum. She actually runs a real office, a real operation, has a real job. She doesn't work on Capitol Hill. She's the real deal. So,
I have to kill what I eat.
That's right. That's right. All right, Margaret, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
It's been my honor to be here.